The one thing about these mics is that
they pull your shirt down, bro. I'm not trying to have you see my chest hairs. So you want to know my wheel specs? This is your video. So I've had my Eclipse a little over 10 years now, and that's, damn, I'm old. And over the span of those 10 years, I've actually had around 6 sets of wheels, and I've come to the conclusion that I found the best wheel specs and tire size for this platform. When it comes to wheels, it's a pretty expensive mod, so you want to make sure that you get the proper size. And as time progressed and I got more wheels, I kind of started figuring out what fits, what doesn't, what tire size to get. And I was getting, I want to say like 2 to 5 DMs daily for like 2-3 years straight when I was posting my Eclipse a lot on Instagram. What are your wheel specs? And it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I do not want to answer anybody. I didn't really have a YouTube back then. I couldn't make a video. And I was just like, forget it. I'm just not gonna tell anybody. Figure it out on your own, just like I did. And that's kind of how I kept it. So now that I have a YouTube channel, I was like, why don't you just make a video and just send everybody the link and they can figure it out. So this is what this is for. Before I start, I kind of do want to explain like kind of what the numbers mean when it comes to the rim and the tire. We have 3 numbers, right? So we have 18 by 9 plus 30, let's say that, right? The 18 determines how big the rim is, right? So a 15-inch rim is going to be a lot smaller. DSM tends to run 17 and 18-inch wheels. The second number is going to be the width of the barrel. So if it's 18 by 9, it's going to be a 9-inch wide rim. So 18, 9. And then the last number is the offset. That's the number that confuses, honestly, I want to say like 90% of people. Where that rim touches, you know, that hub right there, that's your offset. So the higher the offset, the more it's going to be pushed inwards towards the car. The lower the offset, the more it's going to be pushed outwards. So you have to determine that sweet spot to figure out where you want the rim to sit and how much poke, if you're gonna be flush, if you're gonna be tucking. And this is why offset's so important, because if you get too high of an offset, it's going to poke in too much. And if you get too low of an offset, it's going to have that mexy poke that nobody likes. Tires, of course, it has 3 numbers. So for example, if a tire is a 275, 30, R18, the 275 is going to determine how wide the tire is. The bigger the number, the wider it is. So a 275 is going to be a lot bigger than a 225 or a 235, right? When it comes to the second number, which is a 30, is basically going to be how tall the side of the tire is, the profile. So the lower the number, the skinnier it's going to be, and the bigger the number, the wider the sidewall is going to be. So if you have a 45 sidewall, it's going to be a lot taller and a lot meatier per se, versus a 30 sidewall tire, which is going to be like a rubber band around the rim. The R18 determines the size of the rim. So if you have a 17-inch rim, you're gonna get R17. If you have an 18-inch rim, you're gonna get R18. I don't know if that made a lot of sense, but hopefully you guys kind of got the concept and were able to visualize how the rim and tire sizes are kind of made up of. If you guys still don't get it, just look up other YouTube videos or Google it and kind of figure out how all the numbers work within the tire and wheel sector. So I do want to go over all the fitments I've had and how I came to the conclusion that the fitment on my TE37s is the best possible fitment for a 2G DSM. I'm sorry for my 1G guys or my 3G or 4G guys, but I've never owned one of those cars and I really don't know what the best fitment is. And another thing you have to know is the fact that looks are subjective. So you have to find out what type of fitment you want. Maybe you want a stance look. Some people like the flush, clean OEM plus look. And some people like the tracks / meaty fitment with a fat tire on it. So to start off with my first set of wheels, I actually got some black RP F1s. Very common wheel, very popular wheel, but those wheels do look good on everything. I quickly figured out that I couldn't drive the car because the offset was too high in the back and the wheel was actually hitting my coilover, which wasn't letting the car move. So I actually had to get a 10mm spacer to push the back wheel back out towards the quarter panel just to be able to drive it. So it's not a big deal, but if you do get the wrong wheel size, you could run into either a massive amount of poke or rubbing issues like that. So I quickly figured out the wheels didn't really fit. I still ran that fitment for, I want to say like 2-3 years. This is back in like 2013. You could actually run stock Evo wheels on these cars. Very popular wheel. You could run the Evo 8s, the Evo 9s, even the Evo 10 wheels. Those are like 18 by 8.5 plus 38 offset on a 245 40R 17 tire. I think they're 17-inch. They fit just fine, give you the flush look. Not a fan, I'd rather run aftermarket wheels, but if you want to keep it clean, simple, and somewhat quote-unquote OEM, you could always get stock Evo wheels that fit fine, and they clear Brembos, which leads me into my second set of wheels, which I actually had to get because I upgraded my Eclipse with some Evo 8 Brembos, which if you guys know, you do have to get very specific wheels because not all wheels are going to clear the front. The back fit fine, but I quickly found out that my RPF ones in the front were actually hitting my calipers, and the Enki RPF ones are flat face wheels, except for the 18 by 8.5 plus 30. What's different about those is the fact that the actual wheel concaves a little bit, makes them look super hideous. I don't know why I got them, but I had to get a wheel that fit the Brembos. And it's kind of funny because I actually got a lot of crap from the DSM guys back then because I put Brembos on a 420A. And with these RPF ones, I had a 245 30 R18 tire, which made it look a little bit slimmer on the side, and I did have to roll my fenders to fit them. So anyways, I then saved up and decided on my next set of wheels, which were actually really nice wheels. They're back here on the corner of the garage, basically like a budget type TE37. They look super similar. They're made by Rays. They're not forged like the TE37s, but it's a great budget option. This time I went with a 17 by 9 plus 22 with a 245 40 R17 tire, if I recall. This was by far the most functional setup I've had on that car ever. Like, it didn't rub, it handled super well, it was wider than ever, and it cleared my Brembos. So that to me was the perfect, most functional setup that I had on that car. So I came to the conclusion that lowering the offset just a little bit to a plus 22 was giving the car the slight amount of poke that I wanted, made it look super aesthetic, kept it functional, but I got over the black super quick and I wanted to go up to 18-inch wheels because I do find them a little more aesthetic for Eclipses. Now, I do want to tell you guys that if you want to keep a DSM functional, I would stick to 17-inch wheels, and if you want to go more for the aesthetics, you could always bump it up to 18s, which is what I have now. And of course, for that fitment, say bye to your fender liners, make sure your fenders are rolled, make sure your fenders are pulled, and you should be set. So I got over the black and I wanted to bump up to 18s, and I ended up going with the same wheels, which is the Rays Graham Light 57DRs, but I went with an 18 by 9.5 plus 22 on a 255 35 R18 tire. This is the golden ticket. This is what you guys have been wanting. These are, in my opinion, the best wheel specs for a Mitsubishi Eclipse or Talon. So I ended up going with these Graham Lights. As soon as I put those wheels on, I was getting DMs left and right about what are your wheel specs, what are your wheel specs. That's the one wheel setup that kind of set the car off. It was just, it looked perfectly like aggressive. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but if you just look at the car, it just looks super aggressive. Is it as functional as the 17s? No, I did start experiencing some rubbing issues in the rear, even with no fender liners, even having my fenders rolled and pulled. And I even had to cut the inside of my quarter panels. If you have a 2G, you know what I'm talking about. I cut those flush, and I still to this day experience rubbing in the rear. Could raise the car up, make it a little more functional, but if you want to stick with the aesthetic profile, then you are going to rub under hard cornering. I also did put the Enki NT03s off the Evo on the Eclipse for one day because they did not fit. These were 18 by 10.5 plus 30 on a 265 35 R18 tire. It looked good. It just had too much poke. It was rubbing on the inside of the back again. I had to run a spacer, which made it poke even more, which then caused rubbing issues. So the rim was too wide, the tire was too fat. It was not a functional setup. I took it out on a photo shoot. It looked really nice to some people, but if I wanted to run NT03s, I would probably have to run an 18 by 9.5 plus 27. And of course have to run a 10mm spacer up front to clear the Brembos because they're flat faced. You could run 18 by 10.5 on a DSM. You just have to be very careful with your offsets, and you do have to get a much smaller tire, and you're basically going to be a stance boy because you're going to have to run a lot of negative camber just to be able to clear that. And to finish off my last set of wheels, which to me is the best wheel and fitment for the Mitsubishi Eclipse, the TE37s. These were 18 by 9.5 plus 22 on a 255 35 R18 tire. This to me is the best fitment. Looks aggressive, super wide, clears the Brembos perfectly, no spacers whatsoever. Now, if you want to run a wide body, what I've seen people run is an 18 by 10.5 plus 15 on a 275 35 R18 tire. If you want to run like the Carbonetics wide body or something like that, it's usually what the guys run to be able to fit, you know, those wider fenders. So if you are wide body, you're gonna have to run a 10.5 and like a 275 or 285 tire to kind of fill that gap. So that's pretty much it as far as wheel specs. If you guys have additional questions, just feel free to let me know. If you want function, go 17 by 9 plus 35 to 22 offsets on a 245/40 R17 tire. And if you want more of an aesthetic look, go with an 18 by 9.5 plus 22 on a 255/35 R18 tire. Hopefully you guys enjoy these 10 years of just trial and error with this car and figuring out what fits best. If you guys have any additional questions, or if you want to add your own wheel specs in the comment section below for other guys to see, write them down. Other than that, I'll let you guys go. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.